The cold conference room air bites at my skin, a stark contrast to the fire roaring silent in my gut. My fingers, steady on the keyboard, type the final command. On the screen, a corporate logo blooms into existence, clean lines against a muted background. Ascendant Designs. Below it, in smaller text, the name of the owner. Her name, Eleanor Vance. Across the vast polished table, a dozen faces stare, some curious, some impressed, none knowing the intricate web that led me to this moment. And then, the doors burst open. He stumbles in, out of breath, eyes wide, searching the room. He sees me first, then the screen. His gaze snaps between my face and the logo, recognition dawning, then horror. His hand flies to his chest. His face, usually composed, crumples like a discarded napkin. He gasps, a choked, rattling sound that echoes in the sudden silence of the room. His knees buckle. He hits the floor with a sickening thud, a heap of tailored fabric and utter, complete devastation. A clinical satisfaction, sharp and pure, pierces through the years of pain. This isn't justice. It's something colder, something earned. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Life before felt like a perfectly curated museum exhibit. Polished surfaces, objects of value precisely placed, a quiet hum of appreciation for the stability, the perceived beauty. I was an architect, not of buildings, but of financial futures. Decades poured into the demanding, unforgiving world of investment banking. Long hours bled into late nights, weekends vanished into spreadsheets and pitch decks. It was a world of sharp edges and sharper minds, where success was measured in numbers, cold and absolute. And I was good at it. More than good. I was relentless. That relentlessness built our life. The sprawling house in the suburbs, the quiet comfort, the vacations we rarely took but knew we could. My husband, Mark, he worked too in a less demanding field. Software development. Stable, comfortable. Our lives ran parallel, touching at the edges in the mornings and evenings, a comfortable companionship built on shared history and mutual respect. Or what I thought was mutual respect. My world was spreadsheets and projections, his was code and quiet evenings. We were partners, building something together. Or so I believed. We talked about the future, retirement, maybe travel after I hit a certain benchmark. That benchmark, the one that felt just within reach after 20 years of clawing my way up, was the $900,000 bonus. It wasn't just money. It was validation. It was the culmination of every sacrifice, every late night, every missed family dinner. It was the key to unlocking a new chapter, a promise of finally easing up, breathing a little deeper. That money was mine, earned drop by painstaking drop of sweat and sheer will. The email landed in my inbox on a Tuesday. Subject, compensation adjustment. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. The number, bold and undeniable, swam before my eyes. $900,000. Tears stung my eyes. Tears of exhaustion, relief, triumph. I did it. I actually did it. I printed the confirmation, held the paper like it was spun gold. I planned to transfer it immediately into a separate, high-yield savings account. A nest egg. Our future. That evening, I told Mark. He smiled, hugged me tight. That's incredible, Sarah. I'm so proud of you. His words felt warm, genuine. We opened a bottle of expensive champagne, the one we'd been saving. We toasted to the future, to us. It felt perfect. The museum exhibit of our life, finally complete, finally secure. The bonus hit my main checking account 2 days later. I saw the number there, briefly, gloriously. $900,000 added to the balance. A number I had only dreamed of. I planned to move it the next morning first thing. Life got in the way, an emergency call from London, a crisis that needed immediate attention. The market was volatile. Sleep was minimal. The bonus was safe, I told myself. Just for one day. What could happen in one day? The next morning, Fueled by lukewarm coffee and adrenaline, I finally logged into the bank. My fingers typed the password, muscle memory after 1,000 transactions. The screen loaded. My eyes scanned the balance. It didn't look right. My brain, wired for numbers, immediately flagged the discrepancy. The balance was back to what it was before the bonus. Panic is a cold, physical sensation. It starts in the gut, a tightening knot, and spreads outward, making your hands tremble, your vision blur slightly at the edges. $900,000.
Gone.
Not transferred to my savings. Not invested. Simply gone. I checked the transaction history. There it was. A single, massive outgoing wire transfer. The date was yesterday. The recipient? Not me. Not any of my investment accounts. The details were frustratingly sparse online. Just an account number and a name that meant nothing to me. A name that wasn't Mark's. A name I didn't recognize. My first thought was error. A glitch. A bank mistake. I called them immediately. The automated system, bright and cheerful, was a cruel mockery of my rising terror. When I finally reached a human, a patient woman with a soothing voice, I explained the situation, my voice trembling despite my efforts to control it. She put me on hold. The muzak was a tinny, unbearable torture. When she returned, her tone had shifted. It was less soothing, more formal. "Ms. Carter," she said, using my maiden name, which I kept professionally. "I'm looking at the transaction. The wire transfer for $900,000 was initiated yesterday. It appears to be a legitimate transfer, authorized by the account holder. But I didn't authorize it." I almost shouted. "That was my bonus. It just arrived. The transfer was initiated from your account," she repeated, her voice flat. "The recipient is a company account. There's nothing in the record indicating any error on our part." "Who is the recipient?" I demanded. She hesitated. "I'm not authorized to disclose that information to you, ma'am. Data privacy." My head swam. Authorized by the account holder? That was me. But I hadn't done it. I hadn't typed in that account number. I hadn't clicked confirm. The only other person with access to that account was Mark. He had his own funds, his own accounts, but he had access to mine, theoretically, for emergencies, though he never used it. He wouldn't. Why would he? I hung up, my mind a chaotic storm of disbelief and fear. It had to be a mistake. Maybe a sophisticated hack? But the bank said authorized. By the account holder. I walked through the house like a ghost. Mark was at work. I checked his study, his computer. Nothing seemed out of place. I felt a growing dread, a cold certainty settling deep in my bones. It wasn't a hack. It wasn't a bank error. It was Mark. It had to be.
But why?
$900,000. My bonus. When he came home that evening, I was waiting. The printed transaction history lay on the coffee table, stark and accusing. He walked in, briefcase in hand, smiling tiredly. His smile faltered when he saw my face, saw the paper. "Sarah? What's wrong?" His voice was laced with concern. Too much concern, I realize now. I pointed to the paper. My voice was low, strained. "The bonus. It's gone. There's a wire transfer here. Yesterday. For $900,000. He looked at the paper, his eyes scanning the details. He didn't pick it up. His face was pale. "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "That's impossible." "It's right there, Mark."
Explain it to me. Did you?
"Did you do something? Did you move it somewhere else? Maybe into a joint account I don't remember?" Desperation made my voice crack. I was pleading with him to offer a simple explanation, a logical reason. He finally picked up the paper, his hand shaking slightly. He stared at the recipient details, his eyes wide. He wouldn't meet mine. I don't know anything about this, Sarah. This isn't me. I would never. Why would I touch your bonus? You worked so hard for that." His denial was too quick, too absolute. It felt rehearsed. My gut twisted. He was lying. I knew it. The man I had built a life with, the man who had hugged me and celebrated with me just yesterday, was standing before me, looking me in the eye and lying. Mark, please, I said, my voice hardening. Don't lie to me. The bank said it was authorized by the account holder. The only other person with access is you. Where did it go? He crumpled the paper in his hand. His eyes darted around the room, everywhere but at me. I swear, Sarah.
I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe the bank is wrong. Maybe it was a hack. It's so much money. Maybe it triggered something. He was grasping at straws, his voice rising in pitch. I felt a cold rage beginning to simmer beneath the panic. Stop lying to me, Mark. $900,000 doesn't just vanish. Who is this? This account number? This name? He sank onto the sofa, running a hand through his hair. He looked defeated, not because he was caught, but because he couldn't maintain the lie. The performance was over. The mask was slipping.
It was.
Alone, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. My heart stopped. Alone? A loan of $900,000? To who? Mark, what have you done? He finally looked at me, his eyes full of a miserable shame that did nothing to quell my fury. It's complicated, Sarah. Something came up. Someone needed help. Someone who needed $900,000 help that you felt you could just take my money. The money I worked 20 years for? Without even telling me? My voice was ice. He hesitated, then spoke the name. The name from the wire transfer. Eleanor Vance. Who is Eleanor Vance? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. He looked away again. Just someone I know. She was in trouble. Financial trouble. She was going to lose everything. Everything? $900,000 to stop her from losing everything? Who is this woman? And why would Mark care this much? A dreadful suspicion began to form, a black pit opening up beneath me.
Is she
just someone you know? Mark? The words were loaded, heavy with unspoken accusation. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. The truth, ugly and brutal, settled over me. The woman who received my bonus, the woman whose financial trouble required $900,000, was not just someone he knew. She was the reason he needed that money, the reason he stole it. She was the other woman, the mistress. The early struggles were a blur of denial, confrontation, and crumbling reality. I spent the next few days pushing Mark, demanding answers, demanding the money back. He was a pathetic mess. He cried, he begged, he confessed the affair, tumbling out in shame-filled whispers and choked sobs. It had been going on for months. Eleanor ran a design business, apparently successful on the surface, but built on shaky financial ground. She'd overextended, missed payments, and was facing losing her studio, her clients, everything. She had come to him, desperate. And Mark, my husband, the man who swore to love and cherish me, had seen fit to play white knight with my life savings, my future. He painted a picture of a woman on the edge, about to lose her dream. He spoke of pity, of feeling responsible somehow, of being caught up in her crisis. It was a narrative of his own foolishness, his weakness, his misguided attempt to fix things. He promised to pay me back. Every cent. He swore it. But how? His salary wasn't close to $900,000. His savings were modest. He had no plan, just empty promises built on the ruins of our trust. I was numb. The betrayal was a physical weight in my chest, making it hard to breathe. My carefully constructed world lay in shards at my feet. My marriage a lie. My financial security stolen. My hard-earned bonus lining the pockets of the woman my husband was having an affair with. The initial shock gave way to a cold, hard fury. I wanted to scream, to break things, to lash out. I wanted to confront her, to see her face, the woman who had benefited from my 20 years of grueling work. But Mark wouldn't give me her contact information. He protected her, even now, even after everything. Every conversation with him was a replay of his pathetic apologies and my simmering rage. He had committed the ultimate financial infidelity, built on a foundation of personal infidelity. He hadn't just spent my money, He had spent my trust, my security, my future. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My work suffered. The relentless focus that had defined me for 2 decades evaporated, replaced by a constant, throbbing pain and a gnawing sense of violation. He had taken more than money. He had taken my peace of mind. The money was gone. Wired. Paid out. The bank couldn't just reverse it. It was a completed transaction. And Mark had no means to repay it quickly. The reality sunk in, heavy and suffocating. The bonus, my symbol of freedom and security, was irrevocably linked to this woman, this affair, this devastating betrayal. I knew I needed help. Not from Mark. Never again from Mark. I needed information. I needed leverage. I needed truth. I hired a private investigator, recommended by a colleague I trusted implicitly, a woman who had survived her own brutal divorce. The PI was a former detective, sharp, quiet, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. I sat in her sterile office and laid out the bare facts, omitting nothing. The bonus, the wire transfer, the name Eleanor Vance, Mark's confession of the affair and the reason for the money. Her expression was impassive, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, understanding, perhaps even pity. She took the bank statement with the wire details. She asked for Mark's full name, Eleanor Vance's name, any details I had about her business. It wasn't much. Just the name of her design firm that Mark had mentioned in passing. Ascendant Designs. "I'll see what I can find," she said, her voice low and steady. This type of financial trail isn't hard to follow. People tend to be sloppy when they're trying to cover something up, or when they think they're safe. Waiting for her findings was torture. Each day was an eternity. I went through the motions of life, working, interacting with Mark, now sleeping in the guest room, a silent, miserable presence, but my mind was consumed. Who was Eleanor Vance? What kind of business did she run? How deep was her trouble that it needed $900,000? And how deep was her connection with Mark? The PI's reports came in dribs and drabs. Emails containing scanned documents, financial records, property deeds, corporate filings. The picture that emerged was both infuriating and strangely interesting. Eleanor Vance was indeed the owner of Ascendant Designs, a small, high-end interior design firm. She catered to wealthy clients, had a reputation for being difficult but talented. But the business was a house of cards, built on debt, leveraged to the hilt. She had taken out significant loans to expand, to hire staff, to rent a lavish studio space. And she was behind, severely behind. The $900,000 wasn't just a casual bailout. It was a desperate lifeline thrown at the 11th hour. Her primary creditor, a private lender, was about to foreclose on the business assets and seize her accounts. My money had arrived just in time to stave off immediate ruin. My bonus hadn't just saved her business. It had paid off her most pressing, most dangerous debt. The irony was a bitter pill. My hard-earned money, given willingly by my husband, had stabilized the financial position of his mistress. The PI also dug into Eleanor herself. Her background, her lifestyle.
It was
expensive. Far more expensive than her legitimate business income seemed to support. The PI suspected other sources of income, less savory ones, but couldn't prove anything concrete. What she could prove was the extent of Eleanor's financial precariousness before my money arrived. She was drowning. The reports also detailed the nature of Mark and Eleanor's relationship. It wasn't just a brief fling. It had been ongoing for nearly a year. Mark had been supporting her financially in smaller ways before the big crisis. Dinners, gifts covering small bills. He was infatuated, clearly blinded by whatever hold she had over him. The PI provided photographs. Mark and Eleanor, laughing over dinner. Mark leaving her studio late at night. Mundane, sickening proof of his double life. The rage intensified, burning hotter and deeper. But something else was starting to surface, a cold, strategic part of my brain that the years in investment banking had honed. As I read through the financial documents the PI provided, analyzing Ascendant Designs' balance sheets, its debts, its assets, I saw not just a mistress's failing business. I saw a target. This was the midpoint shift. The emotional devastation was still there, a constant ache beneath my ribs. The betrayal was a raw wound. But the initial impulse for outright destruction, for screaming and burning everything down, began to fade, replaced by a chilling calm. What was my goal? To get the money back?
Yes.
To hurt Mark? To hurt Eleanor? Maybe, but that felt
Small.
temporary. Revenge was fleeting. I wanted something more permanent. Something that undid the damage, not just by restoration but by transformation. Mark had used my money to save her business. My money was now tangled up in her assets, her debts, the ones he didn't pay off, her financial structure. The $900,000 hadn't vanished into thin air. It had been injected into Ascendant Designs. It was now part of its equity structure, or used to pay off its liabilities, strengthening its balance sheet. The PI's report showed Eleanor was still leveraged, still facing other debts, just not the one my money had cleared. Her business was fragile, vulnerable, and I knew businesses. I knew finance. I knew how to analyze a company, how to find its weak points, how to value it, how to acquire it. The idea, when it first formed, felt insane. Acquire Eleanor Vance's business? The business saved by my stolen money? It was audacious. It was poetic.
It was perfect.
It wasn't about getting my money back in a simple transfer. It was about reclaiming it, yes, but also about taking control of the situation, of the narrative, of the very thing my husband had used to betray me. It was about turning his act of infidelity and financial theft into my ultimate leverage, my ultimate victory. This wouldn't be easy. It would require discretion, speed, and significant financial maneuvering. It would require leveraging my own network, my reputation, my legal team. It would require a level of cold, calculated focus that I hadn't needed since the early, brutal days of my career. But the thought took root, growing from a seed of possibility into a concrete, compelling plan. This wasn't just karma. This was calculated, strategic consequence. Mark thought he was saving her. He had actually just made her business a more attractive, albeit complex, acquisition target. He had, in effect, invested my money into the very thing I would now take. The deepening crisis wasn't just the loss of the money or the end of my marriage. It was the profound sense of having the ground collapse beneath me. The person I trusted implicitly had fundamentally violated that trust. The life I had built, brick by careful brick, felt like a hollow shell. Every memory with Mark was now tainted, viewed through the lens of his deception. Had he ever really loved me? Or was I just a convenient source of stability, of financial security he could tap when his mistress needed saving? My own career, the source of my identity and independence, felt precarious. The emotional turmoil was affecting my performance. I was distracted, short-tempered. My reputation, built on being sharp and in control, felt vulnerable. I was afraid I might lose that too. And there was the public humiliation, even if only perceived. The thought of colleagues, friends, family finding out. The pity in their eyes, or worse, the gossip. The story of the successful career woman whose husband stole her bonus for his mistress. It was a tabloid headline, a humiliation I couldn't bear. Eleanor Vance herself became an obsession. The PI continued to dig, providing more details about her financial struggles, her personality, difficult, entitled, prone to drama, her network. She wasn't just a passive recipient of Mark's misguided generosity. She had actively manipulated him, played on his weaknesses. She knew he was married. She knew the kind of money he earned, and clearly, she had a sense of entitlement to it. This wasn't just a woman in trouble. This was a predator, and Mark was her easy prey. The money he gave her, my money, had solved her immediate problem, but the PI's reports showed she hadn't suddenly become financially responsible. She was still spending lavishly, still overextended in other areas. The $900,000 was a temporary fix, not a cure. Her business was still fundamentally unstable, just with a slightly cleaner balance sheet in one specific area. The more I learned about Eleanor, about the precarious state of her business, even after receiving my bonus, the more the plan solidified. It wasn't just about getting the money back. It was about dismantling the power structure Mark had foolishly built with my resources. It was about taking her foundation, the very thing he thought he was saving for her. I consulted with a corporate lawyer I trusted implicitly, a fierce woman known for her aggressive acquisition strategies. I presented the situation in purely business terms initially. A small design firm, financially distressed, potentially undervalued, with specific liabilities recently cleared by a mysterious, angel investor, I implied. Was it a viable acquisition target? Could it be acquired quickly and discreetly? She analyzed the financials the PI had gathered, the legal structure of Ascendant Designs. She saw the potential. It's risky, she warned. Small businesses like this are often extensions of the owner's personality and network. If Eleanor leaves, key clients might follow. And you're not in the design business. You'd need a management team. I have resources, I said, my voice steady. Financial resources, certainly. And I can find the right people to run it. The goal isn't just profit. The goal is strategic. The lawyer, sharp as a tack, gave me a long, appraising look. She didn't ask about the angel investor or the strategic goal beyond the business terms. She understood that sometimes in the corporate world, moves were made for reasons that transcended the balance sheet. She agreed to help. The turning point was signing the engagement letter with the lawyer. This wasn't just information gathering anymore. This was action. This was the plan moving from abstract possibility to concrete execution. There was no going back. I was committing my resources, my time, my emotional energy to this complex, potentially ruinous endeavor. I felt a surge of determination, cold and hard. The fear, the pain, the humiliation. I channeled it all. It became fuel. Mark's betrayal hadn't broken me. It had forged me into something sharper, something more dangerous. Eleanor's entitlement hadn't intimidated me. It had revealed her as a target. The plan was intricate. Discreet inquiries into Ascendant Designs' market position and client base. Valuing the business based on its assets, its remaining liabilities, its revenue streams, however inconsistent. Identifying the key stakeholders beyond Eleanor, her remaining creditors, her major clients, key employees. We needed to approach her in a way that wouldn't spook her, wouldn't give her time to shore up her defenses, or find another desperate bailout. The best approach, the lawyer advised, was an unsolicited offer delivered swiftly and decisively. An offer that was fair enough to be tempting, given her ongoing financial tightrope walk, but structured in a way that gave us control, quickly. Funding the acquisition would require leveraging some of my other investments, using lines of credit. It was a risk, a calculated risk. My own financial security, the one I had worked so hard for, was on the line again, this time by my own hand, in pursuit of a different kind of security, the security of knowing I had taken back what was mine on my terms. Mark remained oblivious. He was consumed by his own misery, his guilt, his pathetic attempts to win me back with apologies and empty promises. He had no idea what was unfolding behind the scenes. He thought the crisis had passed, that he had weathered the storm, albeit with immense damage to our marriage. He had no clue that the storm was just beginning, and it was heading directly for the safe harbor he thought he'd created for Eleanor with my money. The negotiation phase, handled by my lawyer and a financial advisor, was tense. Eleanor, predictably, was difficult. She inflated the value of her business, downplayed its liabilities. But we had the data. The PI's thorough work had given us a clear picture of her financial reality, the debts still hanging over her, the precarious nature of her client relationships. We countered her demands with facts, with documented evidence of her business's true state. We highlighted the risks she was still facing. We presented a firm offer, take it or leave it. The terms were structured to give us control immediately upon signing, with clauses tied to retaining key staff and client handover. It was a lifeline for her, a chance to walk away with something rather than lose everything to her other creditors, who were still circling like sharks. She pushed back, tried to negotiate better terms, but she was in a weak position, and she knew it. My team was polite but firm. The offer was generous given the true state of her business, But it wasn't going to wait forever. There were other opportunities they were exploring, they hinted. The tension built over weeks. Legal documents drafted, reviewed, redrafted. Financial models run and rerun. The secrecy was paramount. Not a word to anyone outside my core team. Especially not to Mark. He was living in a separate reality, one where he believed the worst was over, and he just needed to mend our relationship. The day of the signing approached. Everything was in place. The funding secured, the legal documents finalized. My lawyer scheduled a meeting. Not with me directly, but with Eleanor and her own, clearly less competent lawyer. The plan was for her to sign the final acquisition papers, transferring ownership of Ascendant Designs to a holding company I had discreetly set up. I arranged my own schedule to be free that afternoon. I told Mark I had a critical client meeting. He barely registered it, lost in his own world of self-pity. The conference room was at my office, but on a different floor, a neutral space used for confidential meetings. My lawyer was there, her expression sharp and focused. My financial advisor, quiet and analytical. Eleanor arrived, dressed impeccably, accompanied by her lawyer, a nervous-looking man in a rumpled suit. She exuded a brittle confidence, a carefully constructed facade. I watched from a small, unobserved office nearby, seeing them through a one-way glass partition. The signing was anticlimactic in its execution, yet loaded with meaning for me. Eleanor, after a final, half-hearted attempt to squeeze a bit more out of us, signed the papers. She didn't look happy, but she looked relieved. She was escaping her financial mess, walking away with a modest settlement, partially funded by my original bonus money, ironically, and no longer burdened by the crushing debt. She had no idea who the ultimate buyer was, only the name of the holding company. My lawyer had ensured my name was nowhere on the initial paperwork presented to Eleanor. As she signed, a cold, hard knot in my stomach began to loosen. It was done. Ascendant Designs was mine. The business saved by my stolen money, the business belonging to the woman who had contributed to the destruction of my marriage, was now under my control. The final act, the public reveal, needed to be impactful. It needed to be undeniable. And Mark needed to witness it. Not just hear about it, but see it. See what his actions had wrought. See the power I had reclaimed. My firm was holding a quarterly executive briefing. It was a formal affair, attended by all senior staff, including Mark, whose department often collaborated on internal projects. I wasn't scheduled to speak, but I arranged with the managing partner, a close confidant who knew some of what I'd been through, minus the full, brutal details, to make a brief announcement at the end. He agreed, intrigued by my request and trusting my judgment implicitly. The briefing was dull, filled with corporate jargon and financial projections. I sat there, outwardly calm, but my heart was a drumbeat against my ribs. Mark was a few rows ahead, looking bored, probably thinking about his next apology. Eleanor Vance was far from his mind, I was sure. He thought that chapter was closed, paid for, and finished. Then it was my turn. The managing partner introduced me, mentioning my recent success with a major deal, unrelated to the bonus. I walked to the podium, my steps measured, my gaze sweeping across the room. My eyes met Mark's for a fleeting second. He offered a weak, hopeful smile. I gave him nothing in return. I stood before them, a room full of colleagues who saw me as the successful, controlled financial architect. They had no idea the storm I had weathered, the battle I had just won in silence. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice clear and strong, amplified by the microphone. "As you know, our firm is always exploring opportunities to expand our portfolio and leverage our expertise in new sectors. Today, I'm pleased to announce a significant acquisition." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. I looked directly at the screen behind me. My assistant clicked a button. The Ascendant Designs logo, the one I had seen on the wire transfer details, the one the PI had confirmed belonged to Eleanor Vance, appeared on the large screen. Effective immediately, I continued, watching Mark's back stiffen in my peripheral vision. Our firm has acquired Ascendant Designs, a leader in high-end interior design, Ascendant Designs represents a strategic entry point into a lucrative market. We see immense potential for synergy and growth. I saw the confusion on people's faces. An investment banking firm buying a design business? It seemed like a strange move. But the managing partner, briefed on the strategic angle, nodded approvingly beside me. We believe this acquisition will allow us to diversify our holdings and capitalize on new trends, I stated, reciting the pre-approved corporate lines. But the real message wasn't in the script. It was in the image on the screen, in the name of the company, in the knowledge of how I came to acquire it. My eyes found Mark again. He had turned in his seat. His face was ashen. His eyes, wide with disbelief, were fixed on the logo, on the name Ascendant Designs.
He knew that name.
He knew what it meant. He knew whose business it was. And in that moment, the full, devastating reality of what I had done crashed down on him. My bonus. Eleanor's business. My acquisition. The perfect, brutal symmetry of it. He understood. He saw the intricate trap I had built, leveraging his betrayal against him and the woman he had tried to save with my money. He saw that his act of theft hadn't just cost him his marriage. It had cost her everything, not through my direct revenge, but through my strategic, calculated response. I hadn't burned her down. I had simply taken the ground she stood on. His hand went to his chest again, just like in the conference room moments ago. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly gray. His eyes rolled back slightly. And then, he pitched forward out of his chair, collapsing onto the floor amidst the stunned silence of the room. The climax was sharp, brutal, and deeply satisfying. Not the kind of satisfaction that brings joy or happiness, but the cold, quiet triumph of a strategist who had executed a complex plan flawlessly. In that moment, watching Mark collapse, I felt a profound sense of vindication. He thought he could steal from me, lie to me, betray me with impunity. He thought he could use my hard work to save his mistress. But he was wrong. Terribly, fatally wrong. My reaction wasn't panic or concern for Mark. It was a chilling calm. Security rushed forward.
People gasped.
But my focus remained steady. The announcement had been made. The acquisition was public. Eleanor Vance's business, saved temporarily by my stolen money, was now mine. And Mark had seen, in the most public way possible, the consequence of his actions. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Mark was taken to the hospital. A mild heart attack, stress-induced, the doctors said. He survived, but the collapse was symbolic. The collapse of his carefully constructed lies. The collapse of his life as he knew it. The news of the acquisition and Mark's dramatic collapse during the announcement spread through the firm like wildfire. The full story didn't come out immediately, but rumors swirled. My managing partner, discreet and supportive, ensured the official narrative focused on the strategic business move. But those who knew me, who knew Mark, pieced things together. The whispers followed me, but they weren't pitying. They were tinged with awe, with respect. I hadn't just survived. I had conquered. Eleanor Vance called my lawyer, then somehow got my personal number. She was hysterical. How could this happen?
Who was I?
She threatened legal action, claimed the sale was invalid. My lawyer calmly dismantled her claims. The paperwork was clean. She had signed willingly. Her business was now legally mine. The money she received from the sale was hers to keep, but Ascendant Designs was gone. Her empire, built on sand and debt and briefly shored up by my bonus, was now under my control. There was nothing she could do. The marriage ended quickly and quietly. There was nothing left to save. Mark's betrayal had been absolute. His subsequent collapse was a physical manifestation of his defeat. He was a broken man, stripped of his dignity and his mistress's business, which was, by extension, now part of my portfolio. He didn't fight the divorce. He couldn't. He owed me $900,000, a debt he could never realistically repay. But by acquiring Ascendant Designs, I had, in a convoluted, indirect way, reclaimed a significant portion of that value. It wasn't a simple repayment, but a strategic repossession. Taking over Ascendant Designs was challenging. It was, as my lawyer predicted, heavily reliant on Eleanor's personal brand. But it wasn't without value. There were talented designers on staff, a network of suppliers, and a few loyal clients who cared more about the quality of work than the owner's personality. We installed a new management team, rebranded subtly, and focused on professionalizing the operation. It became a successful, profitable subsidiary of my firm's diverse holdings. The $900,000 bonus was gone, yes. I never saw that specific money again. But I had taken something far more valuable. I had taken control. I had taken her business. I had turned my husband's attempt to build a life with someone else, using my resources, into the very tool of his undoing and my ultimate victory. The satisfaction remains, cold and enduring. It's not a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's the quiet hum of power reclaimed, of justice served on my own terms. The museum exhibit of my life is different now. Some pieces are missing, shattered beyond repair. But the remaining ones are stronger, rearranged in a new, more resilient structure. I learned that the greatest security isn't just in the numbers in your bank account, but in your own strength, your own intellect, your own unwavering resolve. And sometimes, the most powerful way to rebuild is to acquire the very ground where everything fell apart. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And please, subscribing helps bring more of these to life.